We eat liner cards for breakfast.
Everything you want to hear from the voice of Cerritos College. WPMD on the Nets, where people make a difference.
Hello, everybody. This is Supyloco's Corner at WPMD, and I am your host, Isaac Furman. I wasn't here last week, mostly because I had a test, so I came a little late, and, I couldn't get the show going. But I'm back here now, and there's something I really want to talk about, and I think it's very important. For those of you who aren't in the know, during spring break, I kind of had this sort of weird, Twitter fiasco. Not that I did anything, but one of the more popular YouTube guys, got into a lot of controversy. Now, a lot of you may have heard about the whole situation with PewDiePie and how, he got in trouble for making anti-Semitic jokes. And Disney, of course, let him go. And he got, he's no longer in YouTube Red. And he got in trouble for his statement of kill all Jews. That's what he got in trouble with. A lot of people would say, oh, well, it's just a joke, Why do people have to take it so seriously? But jokes can sometimes go too far. And it's especially notable when you have people like Andrew Anglin talking about how how trying to make jokes of the Holocaust about, killing Jews. You keep making those jokes. And the whole point of it is to desensitize people from that sort of thing. So that when the actual thing happens, no one will bat an eye on it. So that's why I think it's important to know the context. Things really began to get weird, I believe, 2 weeks after. And this is around, beginning spring break here in Cerritos, about 2 weeks ago. And it all started, well, I wouldn't say it all started. There were signs of this beforehand. But the direct, final straw, the nail in the coffin was 2 weeks ago, when you had Steve King, congressman from Iowa, and, horrendously racist. He tweeted, we can't, rebuild civilization on someone else's babies. And this was mostly a response to him meeting with Geert Wilders of the Netherlands, who was, running for prime minister, if I'm correct, of the Netherlands. Of course, the good thing is that Geert Wilders lost the election. Steve King put up that tweet, and there was a lot of controversy around it. Honestly, I was not that surprised that he got in trouble for it. I'm not that surprised that he said those things because, Steve King, he's been horrible. It got strange when he started tweeting, when JonTron started responding to his tweet and agreeing with him. And then he got into a whole, conversation and, spouting white supremacist talking points. That was the last straw for many people. The people have had enough. They were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt so many times. My earliest experience would probably have to be with his statement on Gamergate. What he said was about Zoe Quinn was that she's not, attractive enough to have a fight over or whatever. Well, that's not what he said. He said is that she's not worth having a fight over. But the reason that I mentioned the whole attractive thing is because he shared this pornographic comic of Zoe Quinn, but people such as myself were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that the guy was genuinely misinformed. And that's perfectly fine. There's been a lot of good people who were into Gamergate that didn't know its origins or its support system. The fact that you had websites like Stormfront, and the Daily Stormer, or as I prefer to call them, and as they would like to perceive themselves as Der Stormer, and various neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups try to get involved in Gamergate, and of course various misogynist groups like A Voice for Men and Return of Kings or whatever MRA stuff is in there. They were supporting it, and you could say, well, that doesn't mean that the supporters are necessarily white supremacists or horrible misogynists. And that's true, except for the fact that they never really kicked them out. They never really said anything about it. And what's worse is that they began adapting their talking points. They were beginning to have talking points that matched those of these white supremacists. And of course, what that ended up doing later is that many of these Gamergaters supported Trump. So don't tell me that they didn't have an influence. They had a massive influence. The Gamergate ended up, creating the talking point using the framing of these white supremacists. And to add to why I think John was misinformed was the fact later on he was told about it and he just ended up abandoning it. Now, you may say, well, it's probably political expedience, and that may be the case, knowing what we know now. But it was there at the time. That's why a lot of people were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Of course, now things really began to go off the deep end when he had an interview with Breitbart. And a lot of people were complaining about the whole, seriously, dude, why are you doing an interview with Breitbart? Now, I didn't think it was that bad. For one, I think having an interview is not necessarily a bad thing. If someone was going to do an interview, this is something I thought about in the campaign as well. Kyle Kalinske also agrees with this. When you had Trump's campaign being followed by, white supremacists, these white supremacist publications, they were allowed to follow Trump around like any other publication. And that's not a bad thing because I don't have a problem. If I was running a campaign, I don't have a problem with who's coming in. I believe in freedom of press, and I think they can come in if they want. They're allowed to report on things if they want. Whether I agree with them or not, and they might even frame it in such a way to make me look bad, but that's the way it is. It's not illegal to report on something. What was wrong with Trump was that he at a certain point he blocked people like the New York Times and the Washington Post and a lot of mainstream outlets to do anything with him, to report on him, because he was offended by the fact that, they might be mean to me. Too bad, dude. Well, they're mean to me. So what? There are some publications who would, there are some people out there that don't like me. So what? There are people out there that if they were going to interview me, they would disagree with my politics. So what? I don't care. So I didn't have a problem with it when it happened. I was stupid enough to give him the benefit of the doubt right there. So yeah, I'm an idiot. This was before the interview was done. This was before the interview. So it was just announcing that they were going to have an interview with him. So I didn't think at face value it was a bad thing. And I think it's, wrong-headed to think that, this is going to be, like, really bad. Well, you don't know. I've seen people I like politically appear in programs I don't like. And they did a pretty good job there. So just because you disagree with them politically does not mean that you should avoid these publications at all costs. The only argument I would say that would be viable is the fact that, and this is what a lot of people tried to tell him, that Breitbart, like you giving them an interview, it's not so much that they disagree, it's that you're legitimizing them. And that's a fair argument. You're legitimizing a tabloid by giving them an interview. Like as if they have an equal sort of place. That's the only way I would see it. If you frame it that way, then I understand. So, I'm going to read the interview. It's not that long, mind you. It's a very short interview. But here we go. And you got to understand why this is important. This is a very important interview to have. So I really want to put this out there. So let's begin. And I'm going to try to be as clean as possible because this is important. So this article is called Exclusive. YouTube star JonTron. I don't think people would trust the media anymore. The headline itself is troubling, but, you could frame it in another way. So maybe it's not that bad. So you come in with an open mind. This is written by Charlie Nash. And it says, I recently had the chance to speak to YouTube star and comedian John Jafari, known online as JonTron, where we spoke about the decline of the mainstream media, the public's distrust for news outlets, and the rise of free speech in response to language policing regressives. I love it because, he's language policing. So anyway, we start. Charlie Nash says, do you think this social justice era we've been through contributed to the election of Donald Trump? Was it a reaction to an overtly politically correct climate? Okay, before I go to John's answer, I think the framing is bad. For one, there's always been social activism, one extent to another, and it's always been considered radical in its present. But do I think it contributed to Trump winning? Some people are petty enough to think so, are petty enough to, vote Trump for that reason, sure. But it doesn't make up for the rest, because the majority of the people who voted for Trump were, a basket of deplorables, like Hillary Clinton said, but also because a lot of people, particularly in the Rust Belt, were desperate. They were angry at the situation that you had Hillary Clinton, who pretty much, with her neoliberal policies, she supported the, sending jobs overseas. And a lot of people in those areas are angry. And they don't feel like she's going to represent them. And they think Trump, rightfully or wrongfully, think that Trump will be that guy who will help them. Because he's an outsider. He's not part of the political system. Whether you think it's right or not, this is the important thing. Because I'm not telling you what Trump really is. I'm telling you what a lot of people thought. So if a lot of people thought that Trump was going to be there and solve their problems, that's what they think. Just because it's not true doesn't mean that they think that way. Just because it's not true doesn't mean that these people don't believe it. That's what people have to distinguish. Reaction to overtly politically correct climate, as if that's unique. So John's answer was, yeah, I definitely do. I think we're sort of in a period where everybody has to think one way in the mainstream way, or else they get socially outcasted. It's almost a monopoly of thought that the left has, and it's anti what they claim to be so pro, which is free speech and liberty. But it's like, you're only correct if you agree with me, or you can have your opinion as long as it's in line with mine. I think that's the prevailing thought of the left at the moment. So once you hear this one, just the first answer, you get the idea that not so much that he's racist, but that he's right-wing. And he doesn't seem to get the idea of that, why the Overton window is the way it is, that why certain things are not taken seriously. Because we've had this conversation before. I'm going to continue on, but right now I'm going to take a break. This has been Supyloco's Corner at WPND, and we will be right back.
If you slowly lost the ability to walk, what would you remember about your final steps? Where you were? Who you were with? Or how you wished you had the strength to take just one more step with someone you cared about? Victims of ALS lose the power to use their legs, eat a solid meal, hold someone close, and simply say, I love you, before losing the ability to breathe. Most often, they remain aware and alert to the world around them as their bodies gradually shut down and die. You don't need to know someone with the disease to know it must be stopped and that those affected need your support. Join the ALS Association's Walk to Defeat ALS and help us find treatments and a cure for Lou Gehrig's disease. Find a walk near you at walktodefeatals.org.
Welcome back. This is Supyloco's Corner at the BPMD, and I am your host, Isaac Furman. One thing I will note, I will be putting this episode on my YouTube channel. It's Supyloco. Just look it up on YouTube, then you get the answer. My profile picture is a picture of Rose Quartz from Steven Universe, except wearing a hat imitating a regular show. And I call the picture Muscle Quartz. So, anyway, back to the article. What's your opinion on the mainstream media? Do you think their election predictions came from a lack of understanding for their audience? He responds, I don't think it was misunderstanding at all. I think it was intention to mislead. At least that's my opinion. I think that the mainstream media dug in. They doubled down. They tripled down. They said, this is what we believe. And then America disagreed with them, so now the country doesn't trust them anymore, and rightly so. I mean, they had spun Donald Trump's campaign since the very first day. They didn't even stop to say, are we doing any accurate reporting? Maybe we should be a little more unbiased even if we don't like this candidate. Which is fair, but I think the blatant lies have killed their credibility, and I'd say that's rightly so. I don't think people will trust them, at least until they redeem some of their credibility. Okay, I have a couple problems with this answer. One, and this is something I did during the election. I ignored national polls. I ignored them. I didn't care for them. I didn't think they were very useful. For this reason, the presidency is decided by the Electoral College. You don't have... The popular vote doesn't determine the candidate. Electoral College does. Knowing that, I ignored the national polls because I thought, yeah, but just because the majority of people prefer one candidate doesn't mean that they'll win. For one, the margin of error was within range. And two, what I did instead was look up state by state. Now, if you were after the conventions, right after the conventions, both of them, you had the state-by-state polls indicated that at one point Hillary could have won with 400 electoral votes. Now, that was back then. The day before, I still had Hillary winning, but only because of I just took the state-by-state polls at a minimum because you had to, go by then. But putting that into account, I had her winning with 272 or 280 something. Not a big win. But even then, I took into account that those individual polls were within the margin of error. So it could go either way. I ignored the national polls. That's what I did. And turned out that the worst case scenario turned out to be the case. Because Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote. Yes. But she lost. She lost in states that I didn't think she had business losing. Which is something you have to consider. Second of all, I don't think it would be misleading to just show what Trump said. It's not like they edited many of the things he said. He called Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, called for a Muslim ban. Donald J. Trump, called for a total ban of Muslims. So I don't know how you can spin it to make that worse. I honestly don't. And America disagreed with them. Again, she won the popular vote. Donald Trump lost the popular vote. So it's not like the majority of Americans agreed with the result. And that's just taking into account votes. We're ignoring the people who can vote but don't. Now, granted, I will say this. The mainstream media, do many in cable news have their own biases? Yes. Can they be wrong? Yes. Are they completely fair to candidates they don't like? No. But that's another issue that I have no time in dealing with. I just have to deal with it. Next question is, So do you think it will be like Gamergate, where people started off reading outlets like Polygon and Gizmodo and Kotaku, and they were the go-to outlets? Then after Gamergate, many people just didn't trust them. And he answers, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know much about Gamergate. That sentence is important. So this goes back to the whole Gamergate thing, which I just kind of ignored it. I mean, not ignored it, but I just brushed it off because it was more about his ignorance than anything. It just didn't really interest me. I didn't know what it was really about, but I think the Gamergate situation is kind of tied into this situation with the social justice mindset. Obviously, they're tied, but this time on a much bigger scale, because it's gone from video game blogs to our entire mainstream media. It's a cataclysm version of Gamergate. And Kotaku didn't... I never really understood why Kotaku is, hated as much as it is. I think they're... Honestly, my opinion on Kotaku is just very boring website. That's it. Anyway. Next question. Heat Street recently misbranded you as a conservative, so I'll give you the opportunity to rebut and address that. And he answered, I voted for Barack Obama twice. I supported Bernie Sanders in the primary. I'm someone who surveys the situation and don't like to put people in camps. I don't like getting into conservative or liberal, which is funny. You just criticize the left, but whatever. Because if you take a piece and run with it, and what if that label changes? I think I'm just somebody who tries to make the best decision every time. Yes, because societies don't adapt to the situations of their time. That last comment wasn't what he answered. I just think it's funny that a couple of logical tweets have made me a conservative, such as strong label. I don't even know what it means to be conservative, or what a conservative is anymore. I feel like the meanings of these labels are changing. I certainly would never have called myself a conservative. And the next question is, you're basically just a comedian like Ethan Klein and H3H3 Productions. That is logical. It doesn't make you conservative if you call out. I'm not going to say it. You could look it up when you say it, but I can't say it on there. Yeah, that's basically the way I would see it. I like to think that all I'm trying to do is see things for the way they are and call it out the way it is. Nowadays, if someone disagrees with you, they could say, well, that's just your opinion. But there are certain points where we got to get into the realm of fact, and sometimes people don't like that very much. I don't think you're going to see a narrative of Lazy Green take off for much longer, because at the end of the day, what kinds of people were trying to tell others how and what to think, and I don't think your average person appreciates that very much. So that's the end of the article. That was pretty bad. Things began to get worse. I mean, he started getting into InfoWars with Alex Jones. Started sharing their stories. He started sharing these articles from InfoWars and their framing. And that was a couple months ago. He started saying some awful things like, if you can go drive to a McDonald's without having to wear a hijab, not abreast. I'm not even going to delve that into it. I'm not. So, yeah, we were beginning to see that he was going further and further right. And I thought, and he was more into sharing conspiracy theories and all that. But how long are you willing to go? And we got our answer. And he started sharing all these incredibly racist talking points. And you had people like Chris Reagan, defending him. John was beginning to say how, rich black people do more crime than poor white people, which I think is absurd. But the reason I bring up Chris Reagan into this is because he shared a statistic from the Bureau of Justice. He talked about, I was skeptical at first. And this isn't a retweet, mind you. This is a picture he posted. Well, I was skeptical at first, but, here's the statistics, and it does back up what John said. So I try to keep an open mind. Maybe he's right. Maybe it literally is the case. First, I tried to look up the source. It says Bureau of Justice. Now, all I could really find was Bureau of Justice statistics. All I could really find was Bureau of Justice statistics, the U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice assistance. I couldn't really, Okay, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, he got it from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Couldn't find it. 2, what John said was about crime overall. And this statistic only talked about homicide. 3rd, it wasn't about how rich black people kill more people than poor white people. It was the other way around. It was about victims. So there was 3 things wrong with it. And it's an outdated statistic because this is from 2006. This is the latest he could in 2006. And of course, that didn't even take into account that these statistics usually talk about, arresting and convicting people rather than the actual act itself. So he lied. Big shock. But here's the thing. After saying all those racist things and Chris Reagan, defending him, being a good little faux liberal, Richard Spencer shared an article. I don't even know if he wrote it or not, but he shared an article talking about red pilling and how this new era of, these reactionary people, these are the people who are examples of good white supremacy, white nationalism. Put in PewDiePie, as we said earlier, Chris Reagan, and JonTron. Now, I don't know about JonTron, but I get the feeling that a person like Chris Reagan, who talks about how liberal he is and everything, how rational he is, and how he likes to, criticize people for having ridiculous beliefs and how, I don't talk about it much, whatever. Would he correct Richard Spencer? And he should, if it's not true. If I was labeled like that, I would rethink a lot of things. And I was labeled as someone that white supremacists should admire. I'd be outraged, and I'd be disgusted with myself. I don't know. I would say that Chris Reagan is more of a white supremacist enabler than he is a white supremacist. So we're going to continue on. And this video I wanted you guys to listen. After all of this mess, during this time, I forgot to mention about Sargon. I'm sorry, but before all this, he went into Sargon of Akkad. He had a live stream. He talked about how he hoped Marine Le Pen would win, or how he wants the AfD to win to uncuck Germany, because if we said, if you uncuck Germany, that all of Europe, that. And I thought, I tweeted this, and I thought, oh, so you mean like uncuck Germany, like how Hitler came into power? You think of that as a good thing? I really hope you're not. I really hope you were dumb enough to not notice it, but yeah, he got a lot of heat for it. But people just, at that point, accepted that's just what he believes. And I began to think to myself, okay, if you're going to mix, because I would like to separate his politics from his show. And he's done, for the most part, a good point in doing that. I don't know what will happen in the future. I honestly don't know. Will he integrate it into his show, or will he just separate it? And I don't know. But I don't care at this point, because I'm unsubscribed to him. I don't want... I'll tell you after this. Right now, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
I'm Tiffany. I have some tips for you on how to quit smoking like I did. First, I did some reading about it. I found a lot of great advice on how to quit smoking and picked out the ways I thought would work best for me. I started by setting a quit date. Then I threw out my ashtrays, lighters, and matches. I did other things too, like exercising more, and it worked. But I'd still get cravings, especially on long car rides. To help me with that, I put a picture of my mother in my car. She died of lung cancer from smoking cigarettes when I was only 16. Now I have a 16-year-old daughter. That picture of my mother reminds me that I don't want to miss all the things my daughter is going to do in her life, including turning 17.
You can quit. For free help, call 1-800-QUIT NOW. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and CDC.
Welcome back. This is Supyloco's Corner at WPMD, and I would like to start the video now because I think it's important to listen to his statement. Let's see if he's going to defend himself. He's going to clear up everything, that maybe he was misinformed.
Well, this certainly has been an interesting week. So recently, as you may have heard, I had a public debate about some contentious topics relevant to the day. I blew up in the media, and they wrote some, charitable articles on me. So I feel like I need to come out and say something. Staying silent doesn't really feel right, so I'm just going to address this here and now. I understand that I wasn't prepared for a debate of this sort with these kinds of sensitive topics at hand adequately. I was a bit all over the place, and I said a lot of stuff that could be misconstrued in all sorts of ways. Things are being extracted from this that I know I don't think. I was in there under a lot of pressure that I'm not used to being under, and as it became clear, I suck at debate. So now every haphazard, offhand remark I made in the heat of the moment is being dissected and speculated on. So I'd like to clarify. I was trying to speak to the increasing tribalization of our culture. These days, we're taught to think in explicitly racial or ethnic categories or in terms of gender or sexual orientation. And I think this in itself plays a big hand in what's gotten our country to the volatile state that it's in. The simple point I was trying to make is that it's hypocritical for those who see everything in terms of race to suddenly turn around and object when white people speak up in what they believe are the best interests of their race. And it's also hypocritical to keep saying you want to have an honest conversation about race if you don't actually want to have an honest conversation about race. And anytime someone brings up an uncomfortable statistic, you freak out and burn things down or something. And I mean, you can see this in all the countless media articles that get pumped out every day from the highest levels saying, for instance, you can't be racist against white people, or it's a good thing whites are going to become a minority. Or you see it on TV when someone as mainstream as Samantha Bee says, white people ruined America for voting Trump.
It's pretty clear who ruined America. White people.
I suppose you could guess the reaction if Samantha Bee said black people ruined America for voting overwhelmingly for Barack Obama, which they did both times. I'm not saying that's true, but the same standard applies. The point I was trying to make, albeit indelicately, is that you can't keep banging the racial category drum and then be surprised and shocked when people think in racial categories. And just for the sake of total clarity, I do completely understand that historically the African American community has had a raw deal in this country. Discrimination certainly exists, but I do believe it goes all ways. I'm not naive to the fact that we, as a country, have had a terrible history of dealing with race. I mean, of course, from slavery to Jim Crow to even the Irish, but the point is that this kind of discrimination is universally wrong, and I feel like, for some reason, we're regressing on this front. Pointing at a race and saying all of this race is blank is racist. And I have to be honest, I don't see many people losing their jobs over this kind of garbage. And I'd like to make it clear, I have no problem with immigration when it's handled correctly. I should have made it clear I was mostly speaking to mass immigration. I am literally a child of two immigrants. It would be pretty heinous of me to say that immigration is impossible, because it's not. You know, I brought all this stuff up offhand in a random Twitch stream late at night, so I understand why people looking at this think I'm some sort of explicit ethno-nationalist, but I'm not. I genuinely believe this country would be better off if we dropped the hyphens and just all referred to each other as fellow Americans. And for a number of years now, it's been disheartening to me to see this strange road we've been headed down. I really don't understand it. And you know, some of these topics have really been weighing on me, so I felt compelled to respond in some way, perhaps against my better judgment. I know people don't expect these kinds of things from me. So in summary, I'm sorry if this has come out of left field for some of you. I hope this has cleared up at least a little bit if you were curious what was going on. Any of the things in the stream that could be considered weird sounding or off-putting, I probably agree with you that they were. So I hope you don't read too much into it. That said, I genuinely hope people keep debating, keep talking to each other, and keep learning. Honest, civil discourse without witch hunts is the only way we're getting out of this mess. I'd prefer to take a step back now, return to doing comedy. It's what I do better anyway. Thank you sincerely to all of you who've supported me through this ride. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to catch up on my new videos, you know where to find me.
There you have it. That was his statement. And after that, I thought that he's dead to me. And I mean it in the way that I want nothing to do with him. He killed his own career. And he knew. Like, he really wants to have it both ways. Like, oh, you know, we're going to go back to comedy. I'm never going to talk about this politics thing again. I think Dick Coughlin said it best, is that if you really think this was so important, why are you backpedaling? Like, if you really think it's that important, and you really think if you just stop talking about it, everything will go back to normal. No, things will not go back to normal. And you have no one to blame but yourself. And you want to know what he said? All right, here's what he said. Wow, how scandalous. Steve King doesn't want his country invaded by people who have contempt for his culture and people. Nazi. This whole stupid system relies on rational people being shamed into shutting up. Glad to see that slowly falling apart. What does that mean by rational people? What do you mean by rational? Like, there's a reason why saying these racist things is a bad thing. Because it's irrational. I mean, he's saying all these things, and if he really thought that, okay, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, what did you expect saying all these things? You really expected that people were just going to accept what you just said and say, yeah, you know, that's like I mean, he said some horrible things about black people, but, you know, I think he's funny. Like, no, you stop doing it. And of course, you have these people who are defending him. Not just Chris Reagan, not just Saragan, but, you know, random people on Twitter who reinforce this sort of belief, saying, in 2017, saying facts makes you a Nazi. Why are you getting hate for facts? I would never understand the left. Another one, I stand with you, JonTron. Don't be afraid to speak your thoughts. Or, that's insanity, John. You're an American, and you've brought joy to the entire world. You may not have done that outside the U.S. You can't go around thinking that you weren't going to get any backlash out of it. A lot of people weren't going to go down with that. A lot of people wouldn't have thought, you know, I'm willing to tolerate that. Like, I try to be optimistic, and I really wanted to think that he really was misinformed, that he was just misinformed. And no, he genuinely is racist. And he's willing to let himself be influenced by racists. I would like to remember John by who he was, not what he became. He became a horrible racist. And that is pretty depressing. I'm going to try my best to just remember the good times. This to me was pretty heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking because I did genuinely like his stuff. I did, you know, laugh. I really loved his music. And then he just destroyed that. He destroyed it himself. People think, well, I mean, you know, he has the right to free speech. And yes, he does. That does not mean that it doesn't have any consequences. Just because you have free speech does not entitle you to a platform. And it does not entitle people having to listen to you. And it's funny because the people who, you know, talk about free speech, like, yeah, I have a right to free speech, would, if they had the choice, silence people they disagree with. And it's especially noticeable because during the weekend, JonTron was kicked out. He had a voice acting role on a minor NPC for the game Yooka-Laylee, which, by the way, I think the game might actually suck. So that's my opinion. I'm not very optimistic about the game. But whatever. Regardless of what I think about the game personally, they took out his voice. A lot of people were outraged. How dare they take out JonTron? You know, freedom of speech. There was literally someone saying that, oh, John, you should sue. They're breaking your First Amendment rights. First of all, the people making the game are from the UK, so First Amendment does not apply to them. Second of all, it's their game. They're allowed to do whatever they want with it. Third, that'll only make things worse. A lawsuit will only make things worse. They don't seem to understand free speech. Because they seem to think that free speech means that you're entitled to a platform. No, you're not. You children are not entitled to a platform. And if the company decided to not have him there because they didn't like what he said, well, which first of all is understandable I wouldn't want a horrible racist to taint my game. I wouldn't want that. And that's your individual decision. But second of all, John doesn't even care. Like, John responded by saying that he understands the decision and he wishes them good luck. So what are you talking about? His free speech is not being violated. And you could say, well, they're silencing John for having racist opinions. He should be allowed to express them. Then he should. He should express himself even more. He should do that. The only one who's telling him to not continue talking about his horrendous beliefs is him. He made the decision to speak, and he's making the decision to shut up. Nobody's arresting him for saying what he did. He's not in any trouble. Sure, some people unsubscribed to him, and he might get dropped. He got dropped from a small role in the game, and he might get dropped by normal boots or whatever. Maybe he'll lose a little money, but that's how the free market works. All well. And hey, his subscriber base might go up because right-wing guys who espouse these racist, misogynistic beliefs make a lot of money. You have people like Sargon Avocado, who's particularly popular, Dave Rubin's making money, Lauren Southern, for some reason, in a channel in which she had no videos. Right now she's making videos. But when she had no videos, Lauren Southern had, I believe, 123,000 subscribers. So it's not a big loss. He'll make the money. He'll still live pretty comfortably. So I'm not going to shed a tear for him. I'm done. It's good to be back here. Thank you guys for listening. This has been Supyloco Corner WPMD. And hopefully we'll see you next week, Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific. So from CE to Shining Sea, this is WPMD.